Hello, fellow gardeners and composting enthusiasts. Welcome back to the Humus Heritage, where we dig deep into the secrets of transforming your kitchen scraps and garden waste into the most valuable treasure your soil could ever ask for. Today, we're tackling something that might just revolutionize the way you think about your compost pile. If you've ever lifted the lid on your bin only to be greeted by a putrid, slimy mess that smells like something died in there, you're not alone. But here's the good news. The solution to your composting woes isn't some expensive gadget or complicated chemical formula. It's something far simpler, yet profoundly overlooked: the strategic layering of natural materials to create invisible highways of oxygen throughout your pile. Let's talk about what's really happening inside that pile of decomposing matter in your backyard. Most gardeners focus on the visible aspects of composting, the right mix of greens and browns, keeping things moist, and occasionally turning the pile. But beneath the surface, there's an entire microscopic universe working tirelessly to break down your organic waste, and these tiny laborers have one absolute requirement: oxygen. Aerobic bacteria, the heroes of efficient composting, are oxygen-dependent organisms that consume organic matter at remarkable speeds while producing virtually no offensive odors. When these microbes have access to adequate oxygen, they generate heat, multiply rapidly, and transform your waste into nutrient-rich humus in a fraction of the time their anaerobic cousins would require. The problem is that most compost piles inadvertently create oxygen-starved environments. As materials settle and decompose, the weight of the pile naturally compresses the contents, squeezing out air pockets and creating dense, impenetrable zones. This is where the magic of strategic layering comes into play. By intentionally incorporating coarse, structurally rigid materials at specific intervals throughout your pile, you're essentially building a network of air channels that resist compression and maintain oxygen flow even as decomposition progresses. Before we dive into solutions, let's identify the enemy. The most common composting disaster is what I call the sludge pit syndrome. You open your bin, and instead of finding crumbly, earthy-smelling compost, you discover a stinking, slimy mass that looks more like primordial ooze than garden gold. This is anaerobic decomposition in action, and it happens when oxygen is completely excluded from your pile. The bacteria that thrive in these conditions produce hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, and other compounds that smell absolutely foul. Beyond the odor, anaerobic decomposition is painfully slow and produces a nutrient-poor end product that can actually harm your plants if applied too early. So, what causes these airflow catastrophes? Well, the primary culprit is usually an overabundance of dense, fine textured materials. Grass clippings, food scraps, and wet leaves all tend to mat together when piled without adequate structural materials mixed in. As they decompose, they become even more compacted, creating an impenetrable barrier to oxygen. Another common mistake is allowing the pile to become waterlogged. When excessive moisture fills all the air spaces between particles, oxygen cannot penetrate, even if the pile isn't particularly dense. Rain can turn a perfectly good pile into a swamp overnight if drainage wasn't considered during construction. Finally, many gardeners unknowingly create problems by building their piles too tall, without adequate base ventilation, or by placing them directly on impermeable surfaces that prevent air from entering from below. Now for the game-changing technique that will transform your composting success: the oxygen layer system using husks, corn stalks, and sticks. This approach works because it leverages the natural structural integrity of coarse plant materials to maintain persistent air channels throughout your pile. Start by creating a foundation layer of about 4 to 6 inches of the coarsest materials you can source. Small branches, pruned twigs, corn stalks cut into manageable lengths, or even bundled straw all work beautifully. This base layer serves a dual purpose. It elevates the pile slightly off the ground, allowing air to enter from below, and it prevents the bottom layer of decomposing material from becoming a compacted anaerobic zone. As you build upward, you want to, adopt a rhythm of alternating layers. Add your typical compost ingredients, nitrogen-rich greens like vegetable peelings, coffee grounds, and fresh grass clippings, mixed with carbon-rich browns like shredded paper, dry leaves, and cardboard. But, here's the crucial difference. Every 8 to 12 inches of standard compost material, insert a distinct aeration layer of 2 to 3 inches of those bulky structural materials. Corn husks are particularly excellent for this purpose because they're fibrous, slow to decompose, and naturally create space even as they break down. Corn stalks can be chopped into 6 to 8 inch segments and laid in a crisscross pattern to maximize air channel formation. The beauty of this system is that it creates what I call air chimneys throughout your pile. These are vertical and horizontal channels where oxygen can flow freely, reaching deep into the center where the most intense microbial activity occurs. As the pile heats up and decomposes, these channels remain open, continuously feeding fresh oxygen to the hard-working aerobic bacteria. You can enhance this effect even further by occasionally inserting a broomstick or piece of PVC pipe vertically into the pile during construction, then wiggling it out to create intentional air shafts. Some composters even leave perforated pipes permanently in place as dedicated ventilation cores. When you implement this oxygen layer system correctly, the results are nothing short of spectacular. First and foremost, you'll notice decomposition happens at lightning speed compared to traditional piles. With adequate oxygen continuously available, aerobic bacteria can work at their maximum efficiency, often reducing bulky garden waste to finished compost in as little as 4 to 6 weeks during warm weather, compared to the 4 to 6 months typical of less aerated systems. The pile will heat up more quickly and maintain higher temperatures, which not only speeds decomposition but also kills weed seeds and pathogens more effectively. The odor transformation is equally dramatic. Instead of the rotten egg or ammonia smell of anaerobic decomposition, properly aerated compost develops a pleasant, earthy aroma reminiscent of forest floor. This makes tending your pile a genuinely enjoyable experience rather than a nose-holding chore you dread. Your neighbors will certainly appreciate the difference too. Beyond speed and smell, the quality of your finished compost will be noticeably superior. Aerobic decomposition produces humus that's rich in beneficial microorganisms, has better nutrient availability, and contains compounds that improve soil structure more effectively than anaerobically produced compost. Your plants will respond with vigorous growth, improved disease resistance, and increased yields. Maintaining your oxygen-layered pile requires minimal ongoing effort, but, a few regular practices will ensure continued success. Check your pile's moisture level weekly by grabbing a handful from about 6 inches deep. It should feel like a wrung-out sponge, moist, but not dripping. If it's too dry, the decomposition slows dramatically, even with perfect aeration. If it's waterlogged, you've negated all those beautiful air channels you created. Add dry brown materials if it's too wet, or sprinkle with water if it's too dry. Monitor the pile's temperature by pushing your hand into the center. If it's barely warm, you may need to add more nitrogen-rich materials or, just make sure there's enough moisture. If you detect any unpleasant odors developing, turn the pile immediately to reintroduce oxygen and add more coarse materials to the mix. The beauty of the layered system is that even when you do need to turn your pile, those structural materials redistribute throughout and continue providing aeration in the remixed pile. As you gain experience, you'll develop an intuitive sense for your pile's needs, making adjustments that keep the aerobic process humming along perfectly. Remember, every gardener's composting journey is unique, influenced by climate, available materials, and personal preferences. The oxygen layer technique isn't rigid. Experiment with different coarse materials based on what's available in your region. Sugarcane stalks, bamboo pieces, thick flower stems, or even shredded cardboard rolls can serve as aeration layers. The key principle remains constant: create and maintain air spaces throughout your pile, and the microbes will reward you with incredible compost. So there you have it, friends, the forgotten oxygen layer trick that professional composters have been using for generations but that somehow never made it into mainstream gardening advice. If you found this guide valuable, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the art and science of soil building. Share this video with your fellow gardeners who might be struggling with their compost piles, because great gardens start with great soil, and great soil starts with understanding these fundamental but often overlooked techniques. Until next time, keep composting, keep growing, and remember that the best gardens are built from the ground up.